You're watching Daybreak on the Rise News channel this Wednesday morning, November 20th from Nigeria's capital of Abuja. As promised, it's time to look at the front pages for you from around the world. And Dr. Constance Ikoko is here in the studios with us to help us review the papers. Good morning, Dr. Ikoko.
A very good morning to you, Adesuwa and Nkechi, the lady in blue.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I hope you guys are doing well.
Fantastic.
Okay, to look at the papers with us this morning, we have Emmanuel Aziki, and he is a columnist with Vanguard newspaper. Hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with this day newspaper. Nigeria's debt to rise to $1.7 billion. That's a debt to World Bank. And then Tinubu, Nigeria can't prosper unless every part thrives. We have FG signs contract for Section 1 of Africa's Trans-Sahara Superhighway. Peter Mba, knowledge, not assets, are the soul of any successful nation. When we look at that Trans-Sahara Superhighway, it's roughly 4,500 kilometers north to south across the Sahara Desert from Algiers and to Nigeria. It's also on the Mediterranean coast of North Africa to Lagos, Nigeria. It can also be referred as the Algiers-Lagos Highway or Lagos-Algiers Highway. I mean, it's a critical infrastructure connecting the African continent. If we are to have the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement come to life in Africa, we do need connection within the continent, Emmanuel, don't we?
Surely we do need connection. We need to boost trade, external and even local trade, because the road will also enter into the heart of Nigeria. It's a welcome development to boost infrastructure at any time. But my problem and my concern is that the internal roads within the country are in a state of, are derelict. They are in a state of disrepair in many cases. I recently traveled from by road to Kogi State, and I know the hell. It's traveling on Nigerian roads is a nightmare. So I think, and we have the administration focusing on legacy projects. You have the Calabar-Lagos Coastal Highway that is consuming trillions of naira at a time that the country does not have that kind of a money. So one would say that it is better for the administration to focus on the internal routes so that our economy can become better, because the bad roads we have in the country are really mitigating against the economy of this country. Government needs to address those first. If we can address those, then we can now lift and be a good neighbor to our fellow African countries.
Right.
Matthew, please, I want to say that if you do not have enough things to export, if you do not have enough products, if you are not bringing out your products from within the country, you cannot bring anything to put on the Trans-African Highway.
Right. Very good points there. Let's quickly look at again that story on this day headline on Peter Mba. He talks about knowledge, not assets, are the soul of any successful nation. He is the governor of Enugu State. He says that he spends 33% of its state budget on education, and that any country interested in long-term economic growth must make education a priority. He's also advocated for what he calls experiential learning, rather than a situation where students memorize books. I mean, you cannot quarrel with Governor Peter Mba. He nailed it. This is very important. Education should be a priority in Nkechi.
Yes, it's crucial because you see Nigeria's underdevelopment is often tied to its education system. And what the governor of Enugu State is basically saying, we have our schools as factories, but they are producing unemployable graduates. And so this is why he's now saying, look, I'm putting 33% of my state budget into education. That's double of UNESCO's recommendation. And for context, you have many other states in Nigeria that are not even scratching that benchmark. So he's saying, look, this, what he calls, I think, experiential learning. It's sort of a breath of fresh air. You have Nigerian education is quoted in this memorizing. You have people who are walking encyclopedias but cannot write you a cover letter. And so he's building an education ecosystem in his state that he thinks will be better for Nigeria and definitely build Nigeria's economy.
Indeed, education is a powerful tool for personal advancement as well as for the society. Let's look at the Guardian newspaper. Fiscal hurdle awaits 47.9 trillion budget, MDA's mobilization capacity. Social challenges, Tinubu warns of unrest as Zulum decries IDP camp polygamy. Falana underscores right to education, flares errant state governors. And then we also have FG revokes directives relating to NYSC posting restrictions. Tompolo accuses Navy of aiding oil thieves. Tompolo is a former Niger Delta militant and CEO of Tantita Security Services, a security company that secures government contracts to protect oil pipelines. Tompolo claims that a lot of the Navy officials have severally shot at his men and men of the Department of State Services and officials of the Nigeria Security and Defense Corps while performing pipeline surveillance. He condemned the Navy for interception of a vessel allegedly used in oil theft in Port Harcourt, leading to a face-off between Tantita and the Navy. I mean, the Nigerian Navy needs to respond to this, don't they, Emmanuel?
Surely they need to respond because these are weighty allegations, and in fact that it borders on economic sabotage that our country presently is producing, where the NNPC now says is about 1.8 million barrels per day, which is far short of our export quota. I think the Navy is on the spot on this occasion. Tantita has, the involvement of Tantita, that's Tompolo's company, in patrolling the seashores have been credited for the lifting of the export capacity of Nigeria. So I think the Navy is on the spot on this occasion. They need to respond. And in fact, not just the Navy, the President needs to respond as the Commander-in-Chief.
Well, the Navy, just to say that the Navy has responded, Rise News correspondent Ovetime George, who did the story, reached out to the Navy for continuation of what Arise stands for in balance and fair reporting. And in a telephone chat, the Director of Naval Information, Abuja, Commodore Adams Aliyu, told Ovetime George that the statement by the chairman of Tantita Security Services Nigeria Limited was false. In other words, they've denied it. But let me just add that this is not the first time we're seeing the back and forth between Tantita and the Nigerian Navy. It can be messy sometimes. And it's not only accusation of complicity and sabotage coming from Tantita. You recall, I don't know who remembers, even Nyesom Wike as governor of Rivers State, openly accused major generals of the army, police, and the NSCDC of complicity. So it's not only Tantita. And what this means, like you have rightly said this morning, we are just celebrating that we are doing 1.8 million barrels per day. And this is coming. We are calling ourselves broke. There's no money. But the National Security Advisor, only in August, during a tour, said Nigeria loses $4 million a day to oil theft. It is mind-boggling that a combination of our security forces, including the Navy, who's in charge of our waterways, and this juicy pipeline contract we give to ex-militants to guide our pipelines and our waterways, has not yielded any result. It hasn't stopped this oil theft.
Indeed, it seems like a lot of people's hands are in the pie, and that is why it's difficult to fight the corruption. If you're involved in corruption, how on earth can you fight that corruption? It looks like that's what is happening here. The Punch this morning, in the Punch we have APC, PDP governors disagree over oil revenue sharing. Dangote refinery begins petrol export to West African nations. AG uncovers 4.6 billion naira unapproved spending in Umahi's ministry. Damago to remain chair as NWC state chairman meet. Pro-Wike group insists on keeping Damagu till October 2025 as NEC meets meeting tops agenda. The National Executive Committee meeting of the People's Democratic Party holds today in Abuja. This report claims plans have been perfected to ensure Damagu remains in office until next year. Emmanuel, when you hear the general sentiment that PDP is dead, it is stories like this that lend credence to it. Damagu until 2025?
Well, it looks very probable because under what is at issue at stake is the agitation by some people in the North Central for Damagun to exit the office, for somebody from the North Central to take over that position. But they do not know. I think they seem to have forgotten, or people do not know, that in 2018, there was an amendment of the PDP constitution that allowed for 2 deputy national chairmen. What the effect of that amendment was to avoid a situation when I think it was Secondus that came in. There was a crisis at that time when somebody from the south took over the position from the north. So they now amended the PDP constitution to the effect that should there be a vacancy in the office of the national chairman, the person from the occupier of the office of deputy national chairman from the zone where the chairman comes from who should step in. There is no limitation under that amendment that stipulated a deadline.
Right.
So I want to say that there is now pressure on the North Central, and you have only one PDP governor from there,
right,
who actually is a lawyer. And I think that PDP governor, that's Governor Muftwang, should know that despite all the agitations, he cannot really do anything.
Okay.
That it seems as if Damagum is now programmed to stay there till 2025.
Well, Nkechi, the points raised by Emmanuel notwithstanding, the change in the constitution of the law of the party, when an acting national chairman doesn't seem to be steering the party towards success, doesn't it make sense that then you have to move and change something?
That's true. Beyond this whole Damagun who stepped in after Ayocha Ayu's court-ordered exit, basically the critics are saying it was just supposed to be a stopgap, and now he's overstayed his welcome. But I think there's a bigger play at hand, and there's a bigger picture to look at when it comes to the issues facing the PDP. I think the more you see, or how do they say, the more you see, the less you know, or the more you look, the less you see. And you also have critics that have been saying, look, his leadership already has even been marred with controversy. They're saying he's not a leader that's galvanizing the party to unity the way they're supposed to be. And there's also critics against him about how he did not steer the party to victory when it comes to the recent elections that we've had in other states. And so we'll see what happens during their meeting next week, if it will yield more clarity or more confusion, because right now, the PDP, there's a lot of confusion internally in that party.
Wow,
Dr. Egoko, did I hear you use the word sense and Nigerian politics in the same sentence?
Well,
like, nothing really makes sense in politics here in our climb. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be watching this, but I think a lot of people think that what is going on in PDP today is disappointing and really sad for the country and people that have been looking up to it. Look at the Punch newspaper. No, we've just looked at the Punch.
Yes.
Daily Trust. Daily Trust. Traditional rulers not afraid of governors, according to Sultan. 5 soldiers, 30 terrorists killed as Boko Haram attacks troops in Borno. 13 months after Tinubu yet to appoint ambassadors. Wow, that's a strong one. Interesting. And then Nigeria's debt profile to hit 138 trillion naira as Tinubu seeks National Assembly nod for fresh 1.8 trillion naira. President Bola Tinubu will make this fresh request from the National Assembly to approve external borrowing in support of the 2024 budget. Adesua, we're already drowning in debt, aren't we?
Yes, we are, definitely. There's no sin in borrowing. Everybody borrows. The UK is talking about a black of about 40 billion pounds, and the woman in charge, Rachel Reeves, is talking about heavy borrowing. She's been criticized for that. So across the world where you look, governments are borrowing. But the question is, what are you borrowing for? In the UK, Rachel Reeves is talking about funding public services that have deteriorated over the years, including the NHS. When we come back to Nigeria and look at this story, what are we borrowing for? You ask yourself the question. You say we're a broke country. We are losing oil theft, which is our black gold daily, to a few people who are sabotaging the economy. So we are borrowing for expenditure, we are borrowing for capital, we are borrowing to pay salaries. That's the question there. And then Nigerians will ask, why we are doing all these borrowings? And we keep hearing, just yesterday we talked about the Office of the Auditor General finding some monies missing. You are borrowing, then some people are stealing the monies you even borrow. What exactly are you using the borrowing for? Why we are sorrowing? Let's at least have a reprieve of why we are borrowing. I think that's the problem here. It's not a problem to borrow, but it's what you're borrowing for.
It looks very bleak. Let's look at the international headlines. We'll begin with Daily Graphic from Ghana. Flower Pot Flyover opens in Ghana. It's a major road that connects major traffic in different parts of Accra, the capital city. The completion of this critical project is seen as a win for the country. We also have WAEC, West African Examinations Council, appealing for release of funds to facilitate results. We're always appealing for money. Cities in South Africa. First, we have a photo of the G20 leaders in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. You have South African President Cyril Ramaphosa at the center there. There's also Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Brazil President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and a host of others. We have the second story, child abusers get off scot-free. The article says the children are not receiving justice in South Africa that they deserve, as only 4% of children that experience sexual and physical abuse cases reported in the past 5 years have led to any convictions. That is worrying, and it is a damning verdict, Emmanuel.
Well,
something to pay attention to.
It is really damning, and when it says only 4%, that is of reported cases. There are several unreported cases, and I think the authorities in the country, in South Africa, need to there need to be more public awareness, and the justice administration system should be oiled to ensure that those who abuse children abusers must face the deserved justice.
And we'll look at Daily Mail. Putin clears way for nuclear strike. Moscow threatened nuclear retaliation last night after Ukraine fired U.S. long-range rockets into the country. Russia claims it shot down 5 of those missiles. Vladimir Putin has signed off law changes to make sure that nuclear laws make it easy for them to deploy in response. Nkechi, it's such an attack, or what is going on now is a door that has been opened. Once that door for nuclear retaliation opens, it will be difficult to close it. Although some say he is just bluffing, but you never know.
You never know, and this type of situation is not just something you call a bluff, even though the US is saying, yeah, this is just some sort of rhetoric that Putin is playing. And there are reports that, look, this move has been planned for months, and he just felt like this timing was just convenient to seem like a retaliation to that green lit that Biden administration has given Ukraine to use U.S. supplied long missiles. It's just classic Putin. He saw a tiny loophole and he's like, okay, this is my time. Let me just throw this announcement in and see what happens. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, let's look at the Times this morning. Farmers bring Whitehall to a standstill in inheritance tax protest. A photo of that massive dissent coming from the farmers all over the United Kingdom. They have told Prime Minister Keir Starmer that they will escalate this protest if he fails to meet with them to discuss inheritance tax. He slapped on them 20% tax on farms with more than £1 million. It's a big story in all UK newspapers this morning. It's also on Daily Express. Can we pull up Daily Express? When I grew up, I wanted to be a farmer, says a little girl there. We also have, let's see what else we have. We have metro.co.uk. It says Farmageddon. They're not joking with that headline. Also in, what other newspaper do we have here? Talking about the famine crisis and the protests against Keir Starmer. Adesua, they're not giving him a break. The farmers are saying that Keir Starmer needs to reverse this policy on them.
Indeed, Keir Starmer, who is attending the G20 summit in Brazil, will return home to this Farmageddon, and I love that headline. By the way, it sums it up, and he has this crisis on his hand. I touched on it yesterday when we were looking at poverty in the UK, and I said that's just even the list of the problem for the Labour government. With the taxes they are imposing on the people, and this is, you know, on the heels of their promises of not taxing the people or workers and all that controversy coming. The farmers are saying this is too much. The government has its own arguments to say that it is not all farms, and it's going to affect only a few. But the farmers are saying, no, this is going to affect about 2/3 of all the farms in the UK, and that's a large proportion. They are saying this will impoverish them. This will mean that a lot of farmers will have to sell their farms to enable more people, share those farmlands, and perhaps reduce production of food. So the UK may be looking at a food crisis on their hands. They may be looking at unemployment when farmers back out and lay off staff. So it's a lot going on there.
Okay.
We'll watch to see the space, really.
Okay, unfortunately we have to wrap it up. That's all we can take for the newspaper review today.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Constance Ikoko, as always. Thank you to our guest commentator this morning, Mr. Azikian, a columnist with Vanguard newspaper. That's all the time we have here on Daybreak as well. Goodbye from me. Up next, it's the morning show. I am Nkechi Nana.
Have a great Wednesday. I am Adesua Omoran. Let's do this again tomorrow. Goodbye.